Okay, I'm pleased to be able to moderate our second panel for today. This morning we looked at some of the national policy structures here within the country, and we looked at a lot of governance programs to manage security. What we want to do in this next session is continue with the governance programs, but then move into more of a focus on how do you operationalize operationalize network security to defend your networks, as well as detecting and responding to attacks when they occur. We do have, I think you're going to enjoy this because the panel that we've put together is very diverse and comes at this problem from some very different and interesting perspectives. I'd like to introduce first Arne Winokur. Arne, again, brings dual perspectives, both from industry and now from government, working with the Ministry of Energy and Industry. His particular strengths, and welcome, Arne.
Thank you.
Again, his particular strength is looking at governance structures and what works in different environments to provide both a high level of network security and an environment that's auditable, so you can really measure what you're doing. Our second panel member, and again, please a warm welcome for Arne. Our second panel member is returning to the stage for the second time. Claudia Los Cicero is the Chief Information Security Officer for Maersk. Again, please give Claudia a warm welcome.
Yes.
Claudio brings some very interesting perspectives, as you heard him so articulately this morning talk about the work that he's done in a number of different forums, but in particular, again, with the Energy Sector Information Security Expert Committee, which is critical to the way the country goes forward. Our third panel member, Abdul Sattar, is Head of Information Communications and Technology for the Qatar Fuel Additives Company. Please welcome Sattar. Thank you. He brings some very unique perspectives, in particular having taken their organization through ISO 27001 certification across all of the business units of the organization, and he'll give us some perspective there. They are now starting through an update of that process as well. And finally, but certainly not the least, we have Yasir Hamza with us. Yasir comes to us from the oil and gas sector as well, and it's great to have you and your perspectives. Yasir has a lot of experience in designing and implementing mission-critical IT structures with a security focus. One of his particular focuses is on defining the business drivers that are tied to security and helping security managers better articulate things in that environment. So with that, we have constituted the panel, and I will join them as we talk through some of their focus areas. I'd like to lead off. Arne, please.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. As the as Tim said, I'm here from the Ministry of Energy and Industry. I'm an advisor to the minister on areas of corporate governance and assurance. And this is where, from my perspective, the rubber hits the road. And because if you look at the industry within the sector, 39 companies plus, responsible for 77 million metric tons of LNG production per year, a great number of petrochemical products across the board, both distilled and refined, as well as oil, responsible for about 70% of the revenue that the government receives. So from our perspective, continued production and unhampered production is very, very important. And given the nature of the business that we're in, there is a great deal of automation. So what we look at when we're examining the industry, we look and say, okay, how can we ensure that this will continue to operate unimpeded and allow us to deliver products to our clients on a consistent basis and earn the revenue that we need to fund this great state of Qatar in its number of different areas. With respect to infrastructure for the 2022, for health, education, roadworks, you name it. It's all contingent on the money or the revenue that's generated. So as QP is sort of the apex of that, that whole, let's say, corporate construct, we look at cybersecurity in terms of three components, three pillars, which I'm going to go over, and they need to be in balance. Not one of them is more important than the other, but we look at governance frameworks and practices. And it's quite evident from what I've witnessed this morning that there is a great deal of development and maturity with respect to governance and governance frameworks and practices. The second one, and we look at this in terms of people, both on the practitioner side as well as on the operation side, because it's very important. We look at what kind of skills are in place. Do we have the technical skills available to us to provide security? But then on the flip side, do we also have the appreciation on the operation side of what cybersecurity requires? We look at, in terms of, do both sides of the equation have the appropriate judgment, the appropriate expertise, the appropriate training to ensure that cybersecurity is optimal? And we do recognize, though, that sometimes there's going to be a breach. We just know that. And then the other thing that we look at is corporate culture. In the presentations this morning with BA Systems, from Ooredoo, it was quite evident that culture is something that we appear to be struggling with. Who's responsible for setting the culture? Because what we need is an integrated corporate culture that allows us to deal with cybersecurity internally so that we can work together both as cybersecurity experts as well as those people who are the consumer of cybersecurity, as well as it allows us to deal with the external environment, those people who we need to work with to maintain cybersecurity, as well as those people who are threatening us. So from a governance perspective, we look at the governance frameworks and the practices as providing us with a great deal of comfort that at least somebody's doing something according to an international standard that will, that's based on best practice and allow appropriate outcomes in terms of creating an appropriate environment, detecting threats, responding to them, and then sharing the information so that everyone can benefit from it. And that's where ICT Qatar comes in is very important in setting that governance and that strategic framework for creating cybersecurity, as well as other institutions like CIRI, through the Qatar Foundation. And then we also have a grand strategy whereby we're trying to take practitioners, academics and government and the business environment and focus on one of the grand strategies, which is cybersecurity. So that's how we look at it, and I get a great deal of comfort coming here as a representative of the minister, and I'm going to be able to say to him, yes, there seems to be a great deal of interest, there's a great deal of work going on, and it's something that nobody's complacent about. So those are my opening comments.
Arne, thank you in particular for introducing the three pillars. I think we're going to want to return to those, so thank you. And now we'd like to move to Claudio for your perspectives.
Sure, thank you. This afternoon session has several key points to discuss. I want to touch upon a couple of them initially, and one of them is about the building of the culture. We talked about this previously in the morning session as well, where one of the panelists was discussing about the consequences aspect, and I also mentioned a little bit about the personalization. The employees, our staff, they really need to see how what we're trying to achieve is not just for the benefit of the organization itself, but also benefits them personally and their families. So it's about putting the connections together for them and showing them that the principles and the good practices that they are learning about through your awareness program not only applies in the office, but also applies with them at home with their families. Learning about how to, how should I say, minimize the amount of content that they share on social media networks, being more scrutinizing of the connection requests that they get, whether they be friend requests through Facebook or connection requests through LinkedIn, things like that. Also, part of that aspect about education and awareness that will help the organizations as well is that they will become more aware of the types of fraudulent activities that take place over the internet through email correspondence, etc., that potentially can cross over into the corporate side. And we've seen that even in Maersk Oil, where we've received emails at the very, very high levels of the organization appearing to come from an even higher level of the organization, requesting that they immediately transfer funds and things along those lines. So, it's building that awareness around everything relating to cybersecurity, and then making, like I said, like the connection to their personal lives with their families will protect them in all aspects. In the papers, you'll see almost on a weekly basis some kind of new scam that's taking place in Qatar, where people have been duped into giving up their life savings, over the internet for different things. So that's a contextual aspect of what I'm discussing. As far as the consequences are concerned, recent studies have shown that there's really only a small percentage of the employees that willfully disobey or do not follow policies. A very small percentage. It's not about they don't know. It's no longer that can no longer be an excuse they don't know. It's that they're purposely going against what's required of them. And they do that because they have not seen consequences being meted out to other staff doing exactly the same thing. So, as an example, if you have users that continually infect their machines and potentially the entire environment by transferring infected USB stick data or browsing sites that share content, videos, music, whatever it may be, and they continually infect their machines, will start blocking their USB ports, start restricting or blocking their internet access. Eventually they'll learn their lesson. But until that happens, those particular people, a very small percentage, will continue to be your bane, your problem. And then there's another point on here about the taking a risk-based approach. I'm one of the, I guess, small minority of people that don't believe in a risk-based approach. It's a nice theory. But in practice, what happens in organizations around the world is that that's the cover-up for a security cost reduction program, rather than taking a true risk-based approach. Unless there's an actual basis for that program to follow, then most likely it's just a whitewashing of situation. So to have it truly a risk-based approach, you need to identify your critical business processes, your critical assets, the supporting infrastructure for it. Then, of course, perform the various business impact analysis, the risk assessments, and then drive your program with that information. Unless that's done for the entire environment to identify the critical processes and critical assets, unless it's done for the entire environment, it really is a whitewash. And it's just a waste of time, because eventually the organization will find itself in a situation that may have been even worse than it started off with. So that's really my opening comments.
Thanks, Claudio.
Certainly.
I think we survived. For a moment there, when you said you didn't believe in a risk-based approach, I was looking for lightning coming down.
Yeah, it's not very popular, just the same thing as taking a business-focused approach. It's almost the same thing.
Yeah, I think that I'm sure will generate some discussion with the audience, so thank you. And now to Abdul.
Thank you, Jim. My name is Abdul Sattar. I am from Qatar Fuel Additives Company. We are producing two petrochemical products, MTBE and methanol. As Mr. Jim said in the introductory session, that CAFAC implemented information security compliance ISO 27001 in 2013. And it was certified by British Standard Institute. This implementation has been done all over the business units in CAFAC, in the plant side as well as the back office side. It's a little bit challenge to implement or the effectiveness of those policies and procedure in place. Still we are improving, and we are in the transition period of upgrading the 2005 version to 2013. What I can share with you that during the implementation, the biggest challenge what we faced that to identify information asset register, which is not only in the back office, in the plant side also it's a tedious job. What we had done with the management's, of course, strong support, we create information security task force.